should get started then, for the big crowd that's here. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's, I think it's quite nice to be able to come and share what I'm doing with other people. I've just letting you know that I'm recording this because I'm on a project which is a collaboration between Lewisham Council and Goldsmiths University, and so I'm just kind of documenting everything that we're doing that's related to the project, so it's for them. But I will stop recording if you want to ask questions. If you don't want to be on the recording, I'm quite happy to just stop the recording at that point. Yes. Okay. So I suspect by now you know my name's Joy Prime, I am a student. I'm a postgraduate student. I have been studying at Goldsmiths, but I've just recently transferred to London College of Fashion, just simply because it's a little bit more related to my research, and so that's where I'm at. Just tell you a little bit about me. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago, but I grew up in England. I came here when I was very young. Grew up in England, spent all of my life in a creative space. My mother was a designer, maker, couturier, and I spent my whole life, as early as I can remember myself, watching her make clothes. For people, for the family, for factories, for everybody. I was discouraged from doing fashion at school. I think when I was 14, they were trying to get all the girls to be secretaries, and that was the big thing at the time. I wasn't having it. I went off and I studied business studies and went into taxation and accounting. And so fashion for me became my hobby until I migrated to Barbados and found this amazing community of people that made clothes for everything. When their kids started new schools, they buy fabric. School clothes were made bespoke from what they would call a needleworker or a dressmaker. And church clothes for special occasions, events. It was just like a real exciting community. And it kind of reignited my desire to do fashion. And so once I returned to London, I did go to London College of Fashion, and I did a BA in fashion studies there. So that's just to give a little bit of background about me. However, so throughout all of my 4 years of studying and subsequent postgraduate study, which included teacher training for post-compulsory education, but also QTS for secondary school. And I did quite a lot of study around fashion design, but I never saw anything that reflected the work that my mother did or her compatriots. And I didn't see anything that represented the people they worked for. They were just invisible, they wasn't part of it. And hence my current project and my continued research. And this is because I've recognised that I have some amazing memories of garments that were made for me, but for other people in my community, but they will disappear and die as the generation that did them died. And so part of my doing this project was to highlight it and let people know they exist, let people know where they lived, where they came from, and what they produced. The project, just to give you a little idea, it's part of the In Living Memory group of projects, which is a people's post-war history of Lewisham. It's a collaboration between Lewisham Council and Goldsmiths University. Goldsmiths have worked with people like me, but also the academics within the university. So Dr. John Price, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with him, from the history department, and Rose Sinclair from design, and a number of others. So they've worked with them to create a meaningful project that would include oral histories from people that lived in Lewisham within the borough, and whatever we can collect. So for my project, some of the objects that I would have collected are hundreds of photographs from people, because lots of the memories are stored in photographs. what they are planning to do is work with some postgraduate students to create learning resources from all of our projects. So if I could just tell you briefly, my project is the Caribbean Couturier in Lewisham, but there's another one about the floods. If you all seem a bit young to know about the floods, you might not know about the floods. Okay, so there was the floods which was in my childhood, where Lewisham was in serious danger of going underwater, and hence the Thames barrier, which you may be familiar with, that was part of the reason that was put up. And so there's histories around that. There's histories around the people's Day of Action in Lewisham, which was like a race war between skinheads and the black community. They were trying to make Lewisham white, so there's lots of histories around that. One of the things they're doing is taking people's personal memories, they're documenting them. And perhaps I could pause here to say that if any of you have got any memories of being in Lewisham, of any of the things, I mean, one of them's even about housing and new houses that are being built. But if you've got any memories, please do get in touch with the community engagement people here, because they're actually wanting to collect as many authentic memories from the borough as possible. And I just think it's really good because the younger generation, like your generation and people who come beyond you, it's good for them to see how rich the borough has been and how exciting the last few decades have been for those of us that have been living here. So that's a little bit about the project. My project is called Caribbean Couturier because it is looking at the couture garments that Caribbean people brought to England, made while they were here, and where they got their skills. I've just got these pictures so you can get an idea. Caribbean couture is not like Vivienne Westwood and Jasmine DeMilo and the Jasper Conran, what they put out on the runway. And that comes with big budgets, huge staff. To be that kind of couturier, you have to have at least 16 members of staff. You have to put out 2 collections a year. There's rules and regulations that allow you to say that you are doing a couture collection on that level. There's also haute couture, which is Parisian, and it is totally governed by the Paris government. You cannot say that your business is haute couture unless you follow certain guidelines. And Charles Frederick Worth, for example, was one of the first. And actually, he wasn't French. Most of them were actually American or British, by the way. But they followed the guidelines. When I talk about Caribbean couturier, I talk about couture in its raw sense. So Oxford and Cambridge Dictionary would describe couture as somebody who designs and makes garments for a client. You have fabric specifically for that client. You make the garment, you design the garment, and it fits them, it fits their personality, their fantasies. And you present them in a way that they want to be presented to the world. And so this is what Caribbean people do. The skills that they brought to England with them included things like surface design and embroidery, frills and lace. And a lot of it was because of economics, that people have had large families. They weren't necessarily very wealthy, but they made beautiful garments because it had a lot to do with their culture and their identity. And they got into doing a lot of surface design because it means you work with what you have and use the surface design to make it look amazing. And so these are some of the things that, it's actually my work, some of my work, so you can see some of the things that they actually do. So just talking about the project now, the relevance and the significance of the project. So it uses oral histories and storytellings around objects and historical events and people's lived experiences. So we actually did some oral history interviews with some people within the community we also attended certain events as well, so that we can just gather people's memories, what they did, what they made. One of the things that we found was, since we've opened the installation and the exhibition, people coming in, that there are lots of people who were not Caribbean, but who remembered what the Caribbean people came here looking like. And I'll show you some pictures, a couple of pictures a little bit later, for you to actually get a visual of that. For me, I'm part of the community that I'm talking about. I grew up in that community, so a lot of the memories that I'm listening to, they're also my memories. I was very young, but I remember seeing it and being a part of that whole process. And my motivation for the project and the research that I do has been as a result of my personal reflection and my desire to just make a difference. One of the things we talk about in academia a lot at the moment is decolonising the curriculum, and it might even be kind of overused now, I don't know, but it's everywhere. They're trying to decolonise everything, and for fashion it's part of that process as well. And for me, when I think of decolonisation, it's just a matter of inclusiveness, that when we talk about fashion design from the 60s, let's include everybody that was part of that process. And it's not necessarily just Caribbean people. One of the things I've discovered from my research is that, you know, people from Scotland were also marginalised from British fashion scene. And I talked to someone who was Irish the other day, and they also felt that what they do has been left out of the mainstream. And so, for me, decolonisation is just being inclusive in the education. Make sure that everybody that participated in the era has an opportunity to present what they have done. And so that's what this project has all been about. Just again, some of the things that we've done. As I've mentioned, oral histories, I've said that already. We've collected hundreds of photographs. And secondary research, we've gone to archives and pulled research that tells you a little bit about where people came from, how they arrived. Lots of people arrived on a boat. Everybody thinks that all the Caribbean people came on the Windrush. They didn't. Some of them did, and the very first one did. I came here on a boat. The boat that we came on was the RMS Hubert, which was actually a mail boat. They used to transport mail via the ships, but they used them for commercial and tourist liners in between. And so that was how we came here. And some people arrived on an airplane. And so some of the secondary research we would have done would have pulled that out and given us information about what some of the other people did, where they lived, and what they might have been able to achieve while they were here. We also did some community events. So apart from the interviews, we did People's Day, which was like really exciting. We talked to a lot of people from the community, and again, one of the things that I've discovered from the community events is how much creative activity draws communities together. You face to face, you can look totally different from each other, and people that come to us and they recognise a sewing machine and what you do with it, and they talk about their memories of having clothes made and having their mother make school clothes for them that they hated because they wanted to be like everybody else. But as an adult, you grow up and you look back and you think, wow, that was actually amazing, and we wished we appreciated it. And the one thing I found is these stories actually just draws the community together. And we've discovered that through People's Day. We did the Phoenix Festival as well. The Hummingbird Club is a Caribbean club for elderly people within the borough. And so we did a Black History Month event with them, which involved them bringing artifacts, talking about their memories. It was amazing because some of them actually brought in original garments that they arrived in England with 60 years ago. And it was quite amazing that people kept things for that length of time and in such great condition. To open the exhibition, we did a panel discussion, which included my mother. Now, what I didn't say at the beginning is my mother's really the inspiration for my project, because I grew up watching her design and make, and I was just conscious of the journey that she went through. She was 24 when she came to England, and when you think at 24, I don't know how old you all are, but I know at 24, I wasn't really looking at taking responsibility for anything, and at that age to get up with your family and go to a strange country, not knowing where you're going, and start all over again, I think it was quite amazing at what they achieved. And so she was really my inspiration. And the panel discussion was a discussion between herself and two other people who were from subsequent generations. So we tried to have a generational conversation between the two of them, between the three of them, to see how much things have changed and what things were similar. The youngest of them is actually at university now studying fashion, and it was really interesting to see just parallels between their experiences and their journeys. I'm also doing an internship with the youngest of the panellists, and we are designing and making a garment for Esther Austin, who you probably may or may not have heard of, but she's an editor of a lifestyle magazine, so she's agreed for us to use her as a guinea pig. We're designing a garment for her, using some of the influences and inspiration from the Caribbean designs from the photographs that we collected. The final thing we're hoping to do is a People's Fashion Show, which is tomorrow in the Lewisham Shopping Centre, actually at the installation site. And the People's Fashion Show is a fashion show with a difference. What we have done is invited people from the community who design and make clothes, or who have had clothes made for them, to come wearing them and model them. And so it's not about a fashion designer, or it's not about my collection, it's collectively what we all within the borough bring to the fashion industry. And so we're looking forward to that. If you all are available, you're welcome to come down and join. It's Unit 17 in the shopping mall. Some people have found it by accident because it's right next door to where Argos used to be. And so lots of people have come looking for Argos and found us instead. And so please feel free to come down and have a look. Please also feel free to come and have a look at the exhibition. It closes after tomorrow, and so get down if you want to. And this is part of the installation, which is a replica of the bedsit that my mother lived in. That is actually my mother in the space. And we put this together because we wanted people to get a sense of what it was like, that people literally crammed into a tiny space like that with their families and lived and worked. And there were 4 of us at the time. It grew to 7 eventually, but by the time there were 7, we were in a big space. And so the installation is like this. One of the things that we have found is many people that come recognise things like the bedspread, the fireplace, the television from their nanas, or from their mum, or from their childhood, and so it has been really well received. And then the other part of it, I'm sorry, it's not a great picture, but we also have a fashion studio next to it where I'm working with the intern to design and make this garment. And that's a rough sketch. You know, most designers can't draw, right? You know, we can't draw. But it's just a rough sketch of what we were trying to achieve. And as with most design, it has evolved and changed a little bit as we've gone along. But we designed this garment using some of the historical inspiration from photographs and memories. And this is kind of like a mood board. It's not great, it's a bit faded actually, so hopefully you can see it. But it's just to show you the kind of look and feel that we were looking at. Some of these images are from 1930s and before. For example, this one, which I'm sorry you can't see it very well, but it's a lady from like 1930. And so it just shows how they dressed when they were in the islands and how they dressed when they came here. And some of the things that we use, for example, this is a circular cushion that lots of people had them in their living rooms, and it had like Canadian smocking around the edge. And we pulled the Canadian smocking and incorporated it into the garment. You know, the lots of frills and as in the little girl's dress here. So we tried to kind of pull a couple of things and put it into a modern day cocktail dress. And again, this is just a reminder of some of the things that make a Caribbean garment Caribbean, and the whole look and feel. For example, we always wore gloves. There was gloves, there was a matching hat, and there was a matching handbag. And when you went out somewhere special, whether it was church, a wedding, a special event, everything was, you weren't completely dressed without those things. There was always embroidery. We used a lot of crochet, applique, just again, because most of the fabric was cotton. Some of the fabric wasn't necessarily very expensive. Sometimes they recycled fabric. We have something which we called it a crocus bag, but it's like rice bags, you know, like if you get the big, are you familiar with it, with what I mean? Awesome. So they have rice bags and it will have writing on it from the manufacturers, and their job was to get the writing off, bleach it, soften it, and if you believe it or not, made underwear for the men, and sheets and pillowcases, and they were able to work it until the fabric was actually comfortable enough to put against your skin. And so that was something that was really significant, that they knew how to just take what they had and just play with it until it was something that was wearable. And when you look at the photographs, sometimes you can't imagine that that was the beginning of the journey. Excuse me. And again, this is just some pictures from the studio. This is my intern, Nicole. And you can't see this very good, it's not very bright, but what we have here is the Canadian smocking that we took the idea from the cushions, and we tried to include it in a dress. So I'm coming to the end now. The reason I shared these pictures was for you to get an idea of what we actually looked like when we arrived in England in the 60s. That was actually me at 5, and this was my sister and my father behind us. And there was lots of lace, there was lots of tulle, there was frills, there was bows, and you can't see very well on the picture, but there's always some kind of thing sewn on it. Beads, flowers, whatever they could get. And again, this is another picture of us with our next door neighbour. And I showed you this just to show you the vast difference in the culture and how we have fused it over the decades. Again, this was Sunday morning, so this is Sunday morning, there's no school, and this was a normal Sunday morning for us. And at 7, again, there's frills and lace, a handbag, a hat, and I guess you'd never imagine a 7-year-old dressed like that nowadays, unless they were in a play. And then again, this was our neighbour who was our bestie, and this was her way of dressing. And I just wanted to let you see how the cultures were so vastly different when we came here. And as a child, I remember actually hating it because I wanted to look the same as my friends. And as we grew over the decades, we changed and changed until the cultures merged. But we look back now and we think, well, that was actually quite amazing. But it just it didn't work for us at the time because we had left a culture behind and come to another one. And lastly, I just wanted to show you how the styles changed over the years, and largely because the Western influence on the Caribbean culture, clothing and identity. And so this picture here is from the 1930s, and it was very significant in terms of what was acceptable dress for a woman, that her necklines had to be right up to here. sleeves had to be at least to here. They couldn't go up past your elbow base, so you could not show your elbow, you couldn't show your shoulders. Crazy enough, you can't show this part of your arm even. That was like a big deal. So they had to have everything covered. Skirts had to be past the knees, and they couldn't be tight. And they made women's clothes attractive by little things they'd add to it. And so, for example, on this one, she has, this is like velvet ribbon plaited around it. Little details to make it feel quite feminine. But they were, and they were a belt, just little details. This is 1960, coming to England. And as you can see, already it's starting to change, that she's allowed to show pieces of her neck. It's not so all the way up here. The sleeves, they would never have been allowed to wear sleeves that short back in the 30s or 40s. But she still has gloves and the handbag and a hat. They always had a hat. And this last picture is from 2018, and it was actually one of my students' work at the end of the term. And this is just to show you how much it has changed, because now it's totally off the shoulder, the neckline's quite low, the hemline is a lot higher than it used to be. But it's still very pretty, and really just to show you how, over the decades, how much it has changed. So that's my presentation. I hope you found it interesting, I hope it's of use, and just feel free to ask me any questions. And I'll turn the recording off now, so people can talk freely, yeah?